this a podcast of our community. People will learn something, from the community, like the Historical Society selling Christmas trees.
We passed that earlier.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I'm like, watch, we're going to see Greg standing outside because they were all out there earlier today. And now I even mentioned that too. I'm like, watch, it'll lead. Next thing you know, we'll be interviewing someone over there.
That's and you should. That way people know about it. It's a way to advertise.
Yeah.
The Boy Scouts, for instance, are going to collect the trees after, at the end of Christmas when you want to get rid of your trees. The Boy Scouts will swing by and pick them up for you.
Oh, wow.
As a part of their fundraiser. So they're helping the Historical Society sell the trees and also handing people flyer. Hey, we'll get your trees later. Great idea.
That is a great idea.
I just learned today that the Boy Scout troop is going to be flipping the switch for the Brookline Christmas tree next Sunday. So that's another thing. You could be at the podcast at that, if you go.
So I was driving past the center of town earlier and I was looking, is that up yet?
The Christmas tree?
No,
no, this is not up yet. The problem with the monument is that if we put it in the ground right now, just as is, let's say the real thing, because it's made out of wood, it would be about this tall in about 6 months because, it's so heavy.
Right.
So what we have to put in is a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot concrete block.
Yeah.
So that it can sit on something. Well, the summer the weather was so bad, with all the rain, that we couldn't get it done. So the plan now is Jerry Farwell, we're going to hire him to dig the hole and pour the concrete. But we're hoping in the spring he can get that done. And then for Memorial Day, we'll do the official dedication of the monument. So we'll put the monument up as soon as we can.
Right.
And if it's April, great. If it's March, even better. But at Memorial Day, we'll have the official dedication. So invite the governor, the senators, to little old Brookline.
Good.
But the actual monument, if you go up to John Weidman's shop, that's another podcast. You can go up there. Andre's Institute.
You have a bunch of ideas.
That's right. Andre's Institute. John is phenomenal, but the actual monument is all ready to go. He's there. The difference is the symbols you see there are not colored. They're bronze, and the ball is about half that size. So it's a granite ball that he made. And the way he made it, he put it like on a turnstile, and he had a cutter of some kind that cuts into the rock, and as it spins, it cuts it. So it does one half, then he flips it over and does the other half, and came out.
Wow.
So it was really cool.
We're gonna have to get some B-reel footage of what that looks like.
Yeah. There's someone Facebook, I think Jim Pope got it. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll look it up later.
But there's so many things here in the Hollis Brookline area. For instance, Delta Dog. Are you familiar with those guys?
No.
So Delta
I'm
Dog.
like a hermit. I just hang out in my house. I bring my kids to school.
This will give you a chance to meet people. So a Delta Dog is in Hollis. And they provide service dogs for veterans. And they provide it for free.
I was looking for a dog.
There you go. Well, now this is, to me personally, they are the first company that does all this dog stuff that really matches the dog to the veteran. Most of them are just like pets. And I'm like, that's not a service dog. You need a dog that fits your needs and all. And it takes generally 8 months for the dog and the veteran to be trained. Both of them. To be trained.
That makes sense. See, someone recommended a small dog for me once, and I'm like, listen, when I'm in that mode in public, it's an irrational fear of something's out to get me, but still, I'm not looking for a little dog that can't even protect me.
That's right.
No, I want to know that this dog's here, not just here to just something to pet.
Right. Exactly. It's doing work for you. So So it definitely they're the best. They are, to me personally. And I've met many of these type of companies that has done their best. Last Sunday, we had our VFW meeting, and a lady came. Her name is Mary Riddle. She's an Air Force captain in the reserves. Her mom was in our VFW. Her mom was a Vietnam nurse. She has since passed away. So Mary joined the Air Force Reserves, and she's going for a doctorate in nursing. So over a year ago, she asked us, I'd like to do it on service dogs for veterans. So I contacted Delta Dogs. So she talked to them. There's a retired Major General that I know. She is in charge of a company that has dogs for people hard of hearing and blind. So she linked up with her, and she said she was a wealth of information. So Mary's getting her doctorate, and she's finding that getting the VA to pay for these dogs for veterans is like a nightmare. It's just really hard to do. It's the people who need it have the least resources, you know?
Right.
So why aren't we making this easier?
When I looked into it for myself, like I was actually going to go, because I knew from Cody, like I was trying to find a breeder of a certain kind of pit bull or whatever, but like a real one, not like a whatever.
A pet, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I was looking into it, and I mean, just to get that breed was a certain price, and then just to get it trained up to do that, I mean, you're talking big bucks, because like you said, you have to train it with the person, and that can take 8 months, or like I guess there's some programs where you actually go like live with the dog for a little while.
Yeah, and that's Delta Dog does all that stuff. So I recommend when you leave tonight, look up Delta Dog Hollis, and you'll get to their website. Absolutely. The VFW, we just gave them a $6,000 donation.
Oh wow!
And that's to, you know, they can buy the dogs, but they're usually strays, believe it or not, you know, go to the shelter and get it. So highly recommend. Great people. Charlotte, I forget her last name. She runs the place. Wonderful lady. So really good. But there's all kinds of organizations in this town in Hollis that
I believe it.
People need to know about.
I believe it.
Another one you need to contact, and when we finish, I'll email you and hook you up with Juliana Rowland. She runs the Hollis Brookline Rotary newsletter. It comes out every Friday. And it's like a newspaper, but it's online. So it tells you about all kinds of things. She could certainly help you out and, you know, with your podcast and get it advertised, you know. So
especially because I like how it's like locally based.
Yeah, and exactly. I think that's a great way if you locally, and then, you know, if it expands, it goes.
Well, right. Yeah. No, I mean, where else are you going to start?
That's
other than right around you.
That's right. So, and there's so much going on that people don't know about. That podcast could be something, you know, they pop in their phone for a car drive, you know.
Right. Well, I do that. I mean, that's kind of like, I guess, kind of what, like if I'm listening to it, other people are.
That's right. Yeah.
And then not only that, I mean, it must be popular because they're out there.
Yeah, that's right. People are listening. Yeah,
as well, right?
Yep, that's good.
But I was gonna pause you for a second. I was gonna be like, all right, so now to give you a little introduction here. So this is a podcast that me and my daughter Alana have started. We're calling it Momentary Muse, and I guess technically, I would say you're our first real guest, other than her.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And,
good.
This is my longtime friend, Greg Darbone.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Good. Justin and Alana, thank you for inviting me. This is great. I'm honored to be the first, you know. I don't know how good I'll be, but I'm honored.
To circle back, can you still buy a brick for the monument?
Yes, absolutely. They're $100, just so people know.
$100 a brick. And we still got to buy our bricks.
Yeah, and we want them dedicated to a veteran. It can be your family member, anonymous, whatever you want, but it's to a veteran, not like in honor of the XYZ company, you know.
Right.
And now's a good time to get them because I'm sending the names that we have so far to the company that's going to engrave them. So we're working on that right now.
Perfect. We'll have to get like a link or something to share.
It's in the newsletter. I'll send that to you.
All right, perfect. Well, Greg, so like we've been friends for a little while.
Ever since fourth grade when you were in fourth grade.
Yeah, that's true. When you moved here from Alaska.
Yep.
But it was funny. So when I was on Facebook the other day, I'm looking through, and I saw a meme that was like, if you were who you wanted to be when you grew up, who would you be now? And you commented on it, and all you said was, I am who I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was just like, that's an interesting response. But you didn't say who that was. So So who are you?
Okay. So when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a soldier. And that's exactly what I grew up to be, was a soldier. And my dad will tell you, my dad's 94. I just talked to him on the phone a few minutes ago. And he'll tell you that I'm the only kid he ever knew that at 5 years old knew exactly what he was going to be and did it. Yeah. So, and not everybody's got that luck, you know. It's,
right. I feel like that's something rare, and that's why it struck me. I'm like, I need to find out how did you pull that off? Because, and I'm not even saying it necessarily in a bad thing. Like, I also didn't think that I'd be trying to do a podcast one day.
Right.
But if it turns out I'm gonna, that'd be fun. But but for someone to be like, that's what I want to do and achieve it. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that is rare because I was thinking about it, last few days before this. And I said to myself, a lot of times, life gives you twists and turns along the way.
Right.
And when you thought you were, going to be, let's say, a famous baseball player, and you're only like me, 5'6", is like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be that guy anymore, kind of thing. Or what happens a lot of times, people get in an accident, or there's a physical disability that occurs, or a disease, or whatever that changes your life dramatically.
Right.
I just, you have to. Some people take it as, oh my God, God hates me, or whatever. Other people take it as a challenge,
Right.
And if you look at some really famous people in history who have overcome things, you'll see a lot of them overcame adversity to get where they were, which is amazing,
It's almost like they say it builds character, but there's like truth behind that. Like,
yeah, there is. It's how you deal with it. I know a lot of people these days seem to think, oh, everything's terrible, wars and disease and all this. And I'm like, Mike Rowe said it very well a few podcasts ago of his. He said, when someone asked him, when would you like to live in history? He goes, right now. Think about it. I mean, 100 years ago, going to the bathroom was even difficult,
Right.
Toilet paper wasn't really invented, and
right.
Plumbing and everything else. He said, this is a great time to be alive. And I'm totally with him. I am totally with him.
That's a good point. It's like what we got here. We were wondering, like, well, we don't want to pop any breakers. And I'm like, I'm sure they've upgraded the electrical here at some point. And we're like, well, when this building was first built, it probably didn't have electricity.
That's right.
It must have at some point.
Yeah. I can tell you. Want me to tell you a little history of the building real quick?
We'll get there. Okay. So you joined the military.
Yeah.
What unit did you serve in?
First of all, I wanted to go to West Point. I grew up right like 5 miles from West Point, right across the river. And there was a National Guard training camp in our backyard, Camp Smith, the largest one in the Northeast. And so every day there was gunfire going off because people at the range, right?
Right.
And then I also grew up during the Vietnam War. So what is now
a boy that wants to join up, and you hear that in the distance.
Yeah, that's right.
And then,
well, there was also Stewart Air Force Base, which is now Stewart Airport, north of West Point. It's in Newburgh. And it used to be an Air Force base where the F-4s would be based, and they were the guys who would stop the Soviets from attacking or whatever. But they also had to do training missions to practice for when they deployed to Vietnam. So our street where I grew up was right in line with the runway at Camp Smith. So these F-4s would come in over the treetops of our houses at, 100 plus miles an hour, doing a gun run, no real firing, but they would practice like attacking an airstrip. So here I am, a little kid at 10 years old, 1966, I was 10 years old. And these F-4s would be coming over, and so low you could see the pilots. And I was like, oh, this is so cool,
Really cool. That's my biggest regret, because I served in the military too. Mm-hmm. You know that. It was, I should have been a pilot.
Well, I know. It's great. So I had this all around me, and then West Point was like the local college and all. So I was focused totally on going to West Point, but I wasn't totally focused on my grades, So I was okay, but I wasn't, the stellar student. So since it was our local college, so to speak, everybody wanted to go to West Point because it's a local college. So I applied and I got an alternate slot. But the two guys who made it from my school, one was Randy Crane, who was the top diver in our swim team and one of the top in the state, and Ted Kozak, who is like all-American soccer player and from our school. So those two guys got accepted to West Point. So when I got the rejection letter, it was an alternate, which, you don't really get a shot. It's just, thanks for coming,
Right.
And so I was really devastated. I was crushed. And I said, what am I going to do now? So I, thought about it. My dad recommended, well, why don't you go to Fordham University, which is in New York City, close enough, and believe it or not, it cost $4,000 a year in tuition, which was a lot of money back in those days.
Yeah.
When you consider when I joined the Army, I was making $9,000 4 years later. So, tuition was almost half of an income of somebody, And as it is today, because Fordham now costs $70,000.
Oh yeah.
So, cost of living and all that. So anyway, so I applied to Fordham and I got accepted. So I said, okay. And they had Army ROTC. The first day I show up at Fordham, student orientation, I walk by the ROTC table and I go, that's it. I can go in the Army this way. So that's how I did it, and go back to my two buddies, Randy Crane and Ted Kozak. So they go to West Point. It starts in July. They have their orientation, all that. And they start. Ted quits after 3 days. So there's a guy I could have replaced him. I could have gone for him, but he quit. And I'll never forgive him for that because, I was like, you took my slot. And, but Randy Crane, he actually graduated West Point. He was on the diving team for West Point, swimming team. And his mom was a nurse for the doctor my mom went to. So the next time Randy Crane and I ran into each other was in Grenada when we were invaded Grenada, and I had to go in an air assault. I hopped on the helicopter and I look at the back of the helmet and it says Captain R. Crane. I tapped him on the shoulder and said, gave him a thumbs up. He's like, hey.
Oh, wow.
So here we are in combat together.
Wow.
So,
what's that like to jump out of a plane into?
Well, no, it was a helicopter. So
or whatever.
We landed, yeah. So it's,
That's going to be wild.
Yeah. Adrenaline running, as you know. But anyway, so I went to Fordham and I joined the ROTC, joined what's called a military fraternity, which is called the Pershing Rifles. And that was formed in the 1800s, late 1800s, by General Pershing himself. That's why they call it the Pershing Rifles, when he was a captain of ROTC at the University of Nebraska. So think about it, late 1880s or 90s, he started this group called the Pershing Rifles, who he wanted to make them more professional. Now, General Pershing went to West Point, and he saw that ROTC needed to produce officers as professional as West Point. So that's why he did that. And so it's a national organization today. It's a big, big thing. It's no longer just a fraternity. Women are allowed in it now. In fact, I was down at Rutgers University a few weeks ago, and I met the Pershing Rifle commander, and she introduced me to the rest of her staff, which is pretty cool. They were very sharp, really, really good cadets.
Nice.
So anyway, that's how I started my military experience. And then got part of there was, in the old days, in the 70s, there was a special forces group called the 11th Special Forces Group, and they were based out of Tappan, New York, which is near West Point, near where I grew up. So we would train with those guys, and especially the Pershing Rifles, because we wanted to be the best cadets. So we'd do the extra stuff. Yeah. Today, the ROTC has something called Ranger Challenge. So they kind of do now what we used to do. But back in my day, ROTC, we couldn't even wear our uniforms when I first got to Fordham. Couldn't wear them in public because the Vietnam War had just ended. Ooh. And there was a lot of, baby killer and all that other crap, I never really experienced, except people calling me a baby killer. I'm like, okay, I haven't killed any babies. I'm not worried about it,
right.
But anyway.
I haven't experienced anything like that either.
Yeah, it's a big turnaround. I'll get to that maybe later. But anyway, so I went with Special Forces guys and I trained with them, our ROTC unit. And then I did 11 Charlie type stuff, mortar guy. So I learned about mortars, and I really like that stuff. And in 1976, summer of 76, I had the opportunity to go to Ranger School the next summer as a cadet. And Captain Robb, who commanded the team that I work with at this 11 Special Forces, he found out I was going to Ranger School. He said, okay, for next year, when we drill, Greg is going to be the team leader. So I had the opportunity to lead all of them Vietnam veterans, except me, and lead them. And they'd teach me about how to write an order, how to recon, all that stuff that I needed to know. So in May of 1977, I took my finals early, and my dad and I drove down to Louisiana, New Orleans, to go see my uncle, his brother, who was dying, unfortunately, of a brain cancer. So I got to see him, and then I took a bus from New Orleans to Fort Benning, and I started airborne school. 3 weeks later, I graduated airborne school, had 5 days off, and I started Ranger School. And
nice.
And the thing about me going to Ranger School then, the professor of military science at Fordham did not like me because he didn't like the Persian rifles. He thought we were neo-Nazis, and he was just, whatever. So because he didn't like me, and I was the commander coming in for the Persian rifles, he had another guy in my ROTC class who was not a Persian rifles. He got the first slot to Ranger School. So he started Ranger School like the end of May. And if he failed any portion and got recycled, which can happen, he still had an extra 3 weeks before school started that he could finish Ranger School and he'd complete. Because going to Ranger School instead of summer camp, see, 99% of the cadets go to summer camp. And in 6 weeks, they learn what they need to learn. Well, Ranger School was 9 weeks. So anyway.
So you can recycle in Ranger School?
Oh, yeah. I had a guy in my class who had recycled 7 times.
Wow. Is that by choice, or does the military make you we think you can go again? Because I know when I went in basic training, I got recycled for over an injury. And
that's usually what happens. Yeah, that's usually what happens. Well, for Ranger School, though, they give you the choice because it's all volunteer.
Right.
But if you quit, if you say, no, I don't want to be recycled, you can't go again. Yeah. Okay, that's your one and only chance.
See, my LT wanted me to go to special forces. And I was never really like a PT stud. And he was like, Adams, it's not about that. He's like, it's about the fact that you never quit.
Well, that's true.
I don't know, but I never did it just because, I ended up getting out of the military. But go on.
That's okay. Yeah. So it's, so that guy, he had if he got recycled once, he could finish and get credit for his summer camp. And then next June graduate and get commissioned. I did not have that opportunity because my Ranger School class ended, and 3 days later I was back in class. So I didn't have, I could not, no wiggle room. I had to pass everything.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I did. Like I said, there was one guy in my class from the 2nd Ranger Battalion who had been recycled 7 times. Oh, wow. And some of it's from injuries, some academic, because he was an E4 and had to learn the stuff that you got to learn to do that. And I asked him one day, man, how do you do that? He goes, that's no different than Ranger Battalion. And I went, oh my God. So, anyway, so I got through Ranger School in one shot. Most people lose weight at Ranger School because they only get 1 meal a day, and you're sleeping maybe an hour a night for 9 weeks. Oof. Okay. So I went in at 135 pounds and I came out at 135 pounds. About 3 weeks later,
same weight.
3 weeks later, I think I was 160 pounds because no candy machine was safe. I was eating. In fact, I came back from Ranger School and I did something stupid. I stayed overnight at my girlfriend's house instead of going home to my parents' house, So I stayed at her house. Next morning I woke up and she had cooked me 3 or 4 pancakes, and I scarfed those down in a second. She made more. I probably ate about 8 pancakes in one sitting, because I've just not eaten in so long. Yeah. So anyway, I gained the weight and I gained muscle and all that kind of stuff. And then graduated college in 1978. And by the way, I graduated Airborne Ranger School. I was only 20 years old. A lot of people go through Ranger School much older, or at least a little older, but I was only 20. So I was still fairly young. And so, excuse me. So then I graduate and I went to the infantry, which was my first choice. I volunteered. I was that stupid.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Tanker's not much better.
That's right. And then you know what they call infantry guys? The tankers call infantry guys?
Grunts. Oh.
Crunchies.
Crunchies. Yeah.
Tanks run over you.
That's the sound they make when you run them
That's
over.
Right. So anyway, I go to Fort Benning and I go through officer basic course, as everybody does. And then when I finished, I had already had Airborne and Ranger School. 99% of my class hadn't been through that. So they all went off to Airborne Ranger School. And so the instructor asked me, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Is there another school I can go to? He says, yeah, there's the mortar platoon course. I said, all right, I like mortars. I'll do that.
Heck yeah.
And that actually changed my entire career. I'm glad I did that. Wow. So I go through the course, 3 weeks of that, and I go over to Germany. And about the 2nd or 3rd week I'm there, it's time to do laundry as a single guy. I'm not married. My girlfriend's in New York City. My fiance.
Why, if you're single, why do you have to do your laundry?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. My fiance at that point, she was in New York City. And so I go down to do laundry one day, and all I'm wearing is a pair of sweatpants. I'm looking, like nothing, And there's this really beautiful redhead down there. And I go, wow, she is something. And so she helps me figure out how to do my laundry and everything. So if you want to really fast forward, that beautiful redhead is now my wife.
Yeah.
So it all worked out.
Is she still teaching you how to do the laundry?
No, she does it all. She doesn't trust me.
that's that weaponized incompetence.
That's perfect. Right. There you go. I like that.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that was a great. Yeah, I know how to do the laundry, but she's like, I don't trust you. Fine. Okay. So anyway, we're in Germany. I'm in the 1st Infantry Division forward, which in that day there was 1st Infantry Division headquartered at Fort Riley, and there was one full brigade in Germany that was the reserve for the 7th Corps. So in those days, you had East and West Germany, you had the Soviet Union, they were ready to attack. So there were 2 corps in Europe, the 5th Corps, which was north, like the middle of Germany, and 7th Corps, we had the southern part of Germany. And we were the reserve for that corps, so we could go all kinds of places. It was a great mission, but I was a platoon leader for a rifle platoon, and it was right after the Vietnam War. I'd wound down, and we were just starting the all-volunteer army. And instead of a 35-man infantry rifle platoon, I had a 12-man rifle platoon. And one of my driver was a heroin addict. One of my squad leaders was a morphine addict, and another squad leader was dealing morphine.
Wow.
That's the army I came into.
Yeah. I've heard stories about like that.
Yeah, it was bad. So it was a tough situation, and I was a small guy. I'm 5'6", it wasn't like I was a big guy. And we'd have beer fests on the post, or the caserna as they call it. And invariably there'd be fights. And,
oh yeah.
And my wife always, she says, I'll never forget you jumping into a dog pile one day. It's like the troops were all beating the crap out of each other. And I was the officer of the day. So I was responsible for keeping law and order, right? So I jumped into the dog pile. I started pulling people off and throwing punches. And by the end of it, she said, I was the only one standing, And people asked, how did you do that? I said, hey, I went to college in New York City,
Yeah, there you go.
I know how to do this. So anyway, that was kind of the army I got into. So 6 months of rifle platoon. And then they made me the weapons platoon leader in the same company, Charlie Company. Weapons platoon had 2 tow vehicles and 3 81 millimeter mortar vehicles, plus an FDC vehicle and stuff like that, fire direction center vehicle. I had that platoon for 18 months, which is longer than most lieutenants, but I was the only mortar platoon trained officer in the whole battalion. So whenever the 4 deuce mortars, the 4.2-inch mortars, which was a platoon and combat support company, and all the other weapons platoon mortars went out for training, I had to go as the safety officer because I was the only one qualified, which to me was just great. We were in the southern part of Germany near the French sector and the Canadian sector. So we would train our mortars at a place called Munsigen, which was owned by the French. And it was in the Canadian and French sector of Germany. If you can imagine, Germany was split up after World War II. Yeah. The northern portion the British had, the major sector was the U.S., and the bottom left corner was Canadian and French. So we got to work with the Canadians and the French armies all the time. It was great. In the Black Forest, if you've ever heard of that. So I would go and I do the mortars all the time. And in my day, when you took the expert infantryman's badge, you took it by
EIB, right?
Right, EIB. It was done by MOS.
Yeah, so they made us take it as tankers right before I got out of the military.
Yeah, but you couldn't get the award.
Wear the badge.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, why are we even doing this?
That's right. Now they have the expert soldier badge to kind of make it so really? Everybody can get that. Yeah,
that's new.
So yeah, it is new. But it's so anyway, the EIB, you took it by your MOS. So you had the 11 Bravos, which are riflemen.
Yep.
But then you also had 11 hotels, which were the tow guys. There were the 11, I think Papa was the designated for guys with dragons. And then there was 11 Charlie, which was the mortar guys. So I took it as the mortar guy. And what was funny is I had to train all the NCOs on how to do all their stations.
Oh.
And then I had to take the test. And like at one station, the NCO goes, "Sir, you taught me how to do this. Okay, you're good." So I thought it was good that I took it as 11 Charlie. So I got my EIB as a lieutenant.
Hey, it's good to have an officer like that. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah, no, it's very true. But the NCOs, there were so few that were actually mortar trained,
Interesting.
So, yeah. So Garrett Woods was my mortar platoon section sergeant. He really good guy. And I didn't have a tow section leader at one point. So I had PFC Fred Murray took over as the section sergeant as a PFC. So he quickly got promoted to specialist. But Fred and we spent a lot of our career together after that, because when he was getting ready to leave Germany, he said, "Hey, sir, what do you think I should do?" I said, "Fred, you need to go to airborne school." Okay. So next time I see Fred, we're both in the 82nd Airborne Division. And now Fred is a retired Special Forces sergeant. So, E7, I think he was when he retired. But he went further, he went Special Forces and all. But Fred was one of my privates. I had another private, not in my platoon, but he grew up in New Jersey, Bob Stodnick, who we got to be really close. And when I got promoted to captain, I had him pin on my captain bars. And he was a sergeant at that point, E5. And I did that to remind myself that it's the NCOs that got me, to where I am.
That was definitely, it's a good approach.
Yeah.
We always had a lot more respect to the officers that would recognize that sort of thing, like on the enlisted side. Because you would sometimes get those officers that thought they were like,
oh yeah, because they're officers,
right?
Yeah. Normally the guys who go through OCS don't think that way, but it's the West Pointers and ROTC that think that. So, but I always remember I had the weapons platoon, then I became the XO of that company, and I had that for 6 months, and then I became executive officer, and then I became the general's aide, because the big red one forward, our brigade, had a general as our commander. And a 1-star, and he was an amazing guy. But he picked me to be his aide. So General Henslick was his name. He was a Korean War veteran. He was a high school dropout, got drafted into the Army for the Korean War, goes in as a private. He retires as a 2-star general.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so one day when I was his aide, we got a phone call to the office, and I took the phone calls, and it was some guy, and he goes, "I'd like to talk to General Henslick." I said, "Well, sir, what can I say it's about?" Because everybody wants to talk to General, complain about something, right? He goes, "You just tell him that the guy who made him an officer on the battlefield in Korea is on the phone." I went, "Oh my God." So I put it on hold. I said, "Sir, you need to take this phone call." He picked it up. He was like a half hour on the phone. And then the next night he had that guy and his family come over to his house for a party. They hadn't seen each other since the Korean War.
Wow.
What happened was that guy, his daughter was married to a soldier who was stationed in Germany. So he was over to visit his daughter. When he picked up the paper, he saw General Henslick. He goes, "That's got to be the same guy." Not many names like that. And sure enough, it was, just amazing. Another amazing thing about the general, besides being a battlefield commission,
that's huge.
That's right. As a high school dropout.
Right. You put that on top of it.
Yeah. But here we are in today's society, everybody's got some color consciousness. Oh my God, this, that, whatever. Well, General Henslick, back in those days, this was 1981. Yeah, when I was his aide, 81. There was prejudice, but it was more the German people. And our black soldiers were being denied entrance into certain bars and restaurants.
Oh, really?
So General Henslick heard about this. He says, "Well, that's wrong." Now, he was a white guy, right?
Yeah. But
so what?
Right.
So what he did is he put on civilian clothes, and he got one of our NCOs, a black female, and had her in civilian clothes as well. And they went to all the bars, and everyone that they refused him, they wrote down, what it was. The next day, the general showed up in his uniform, and he'd go to the owner and go, "You remember me from last night?" No, I don't. "Let me remind you. Here's a picture." He showed a picture. He says, "You refuse service to any of my soldiers. I am closing your bar to them." every one of them.
Yeah, because he can just make an order and say that no one can go to that bar.
That's right.
Because they would do that at Fort Hood all the time.
Yeah, that's right. So that changed overnight. All of a sudden, every bar accepted black and white soldiers. It's pretty amazing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, he was that kind of person. Unfortunately, he developed cancer from Agent Orange, as we know today. Back then, we didn't know.
Right.
And he, in May of '82, he had to be moved to Walter Reed, and where he eventually died like 2 months later. Oof. So sad.
Hello, everyone. This is Justin Adams from Momentary Muse. Please excuse this quick interruption as I tell you about today's sponsor, Hopes and Dreams. Here at Momentary Muse, we have hopes and dreams. For example, my daughter Alana hopes to speak on our podcast, and therefore she dreams about having a microphone. Be like Hopes and Dreams and sponsor an episode of Momentary Muse to help buy Alana a microphone and to help us keep bringing you more episodes of exclusive interviews with interesting people. Now back to today's interview.
So that painting or that print that's up there, the tanks, the artist who did that actually signed that painting. So he's a friend of mine. So gave that to our post.
So you jumped a few times, right?
Yeah, I'll get to that soon. After I left Germany, that's when I had my last mechanized assignment. I was airborne the rest of my career. Yep. Just a few times. I was 6 feet tall till I started jumping. And my daughter's the only one that hasn't jumped with me yet.
Yeah, well, when I turn 18, the day I turn 18, we're going jumping.
There you go. You can go right here to Pepperell. You know that, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a
skydive. We were trying to go in Florida, but when we found out, yeah, we were trying to go in Florida before we realized you have to be 18.
Oh, okay. Well,
it was like one of the highest jumps you can do. Some.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, where are you at in your story?
All right, so General Henslick dies, but he leaves before he dies, and a new general comes in, General Price, and I'm his aide till August when I moved to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So because of my mortar experience, yeah. So I got told I'm going to go to the Artillery Officers Advanced Course rather than the Infantry Officers Advanced Course. So when the guy calls me from Infantry Branch in Washington, D.C., the guys who control your career, I said, okay, I'll go, but what do I get for it? He goes, well, you get to pick any assignment you want. I went, okay, send me to 82nd Airborne Division. And that's why I say going to mortar school affected the rest of my career. So, I wouldn't have gone to artillery school if I had not been at mortars already.
Yeah.
So I leave in August and I arrive at Fort Sill and I go through the school there. My girlfriend, that redhead we talked about earlier, my fiance had dumped me for another guy. So that's okay. Saved my life. 45 days before the wedding. It was great. She married that guy and then divorced him 3 years later and has never married since. So it's the way it goes. But so my wife, Arlene, she was going to the Ordnance Officers Advanced Course at the time, which was at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. So she would complain about there was nothing to do in Aberdeen. I said, you should be at Fort Sill. There's nothing in Lawton, Oklahoma. It's not that way anymore. It's much more developed. But so anyway, after the Artillery Advanced Course, I moved to Fort Bragg, and that's where Arlene was already. She had graduated a few months before from her school. So no, we were not married. So this is 1983, in May of 83. And I get assigned to the 2nd Brigade, 82nd Airborne Division, where I'm the personnel officer for the brigade, which is usually a major's position. And I'm just a brand new captain. I'm like, I don't know jack, really, literally. It's my first.
My captains knew everything.
Yeah, no. I thought I did, and then I get in this job. I'm like, I don't know jack. So, and then it's my first staff job too. So I've never been on a staff before.
Right.
And so I'm a captain in a major's position. The S2 is a captain. Then the S3 is a captain, which is a major's job with a major with a lot of experience. And he's a captain, Matt Belford. And then the S4, the logistics is a major. And the brigade commander we got is this old crusty colonel who's been jumping since he was born practically. And his desk was just a mess every day. And he'd come in at 5 a.m, do some paperwork. And at 6, he'd be out doing PT with the troops. He'd come home, he'd come back, shower, and then go back out to the field. And he stayed in the field all day long. He was definitely a training kind of guy. But his paperwork would pile up. And then his desk was such a mess that in order for me to get him to sign anything, because I was responsible for that stuff, I had to put it in his chair so he'd find it. You know?
So this is why paperwork never made it through. What was it, S2 or S?
That's right. I tell you what, it was. And the XO I had, the brigade XO, he was a major, which is usually a lieutenant colonel's job. But he was a aviator in Vietnam, but he was an infantry officer. In those days, aviation branch was not yet made, so he was a dual kind of thing. And he hated me. I literally know he hated me. He just, and then, so then
you gotta have one of those.
That's right. In October,
if you don't have any of those, it means you're being too nice to everyone.
That's right. Yeah. So October of '83, we get a new brigade commander, Colonel Steve Silvasi, retired as a 2-star, and Colonel Silvasi at the time. First day he walked into that office that was going to be his brigade commander. He stood there at the opening of the office. In my office, I could see into his. And I just kind of stood there waiting. He backed up, went into my office, said, "Captain, you're the S1, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "I promise you, my desk will never look like that." In fact, we set up another smaller desk in there so Colonel Silvasi could get things done, whatever. So anyway, Colonel Silvasi takes over, and 10 days after he takes over, we get deployed to Grenada. That's the first time the U.S. Army has been deployed to a war since the Vietnam War, which, it's really only 12 or so years hence. But things were completely different. Like we had an all-volunteer army. It was the first time that we ever did what's called an 18-hour sequence, because the 82nd always practiced this mission that if we were called, we had 18 hours from the minute we were called to the first plane taking off. We had 18 hours to get it done.
Right.
So
that rapid deployment.
Yes.
Like when I was in the military, we never went on alert. Yeah. But I remember my dad always telling, because he was in the 101st.
Yeah, and they did the same thing.
Tell me about going on alert. So
that's right.
I just never really knew what that was or what that experience was like.
Well, but yeah, because you were in the Army when it was at war.
When we were already at war.
That's right. For us, we were waiting. So Grenada was this mission to go to a Caribbean island that had a U.S. medical school there. And there were a lot of a lot of U.S. citizens on that island going to the school. So our mission was to rescue the U.S. and friendly foreign nationals from that country who had a coup d'etat, and there were Cubans there and all that. Well, that was all an excuse. What really was, the Soviets were shipping arms to Nicaragua, which is in Central America. So they would land planes on Grenada on this beautiful runway that they didn't need because the Soviets needed it. The students told me later they would watch submarines come up at the end of the runway and they would ship boxes from the airplane to the submarine.
Oh, wow.
So that's what they were shipping arms that way. So, but the students were in danger because the Cuban and the communist government of Grenada didn't like the Americans and all that. So we went there, the Rangers jumped in, and the 82nd air landed. And that took us longer than we needed. It took us a whole day just to land the brigade of the 82nd.
Oh, wow.
If we had jumped, we would have been done in 2 hours.
Right.
It would have been over. But anyway, so my mission was to rescue the students at the True Blue campus, which happened to sit at one end of the runway, like the end of the runway, and then there was this divot in the ground where the school was. It was like a little cliff there.
Yeah.
So my mission was to get those students. And so I land. And
how many students?
There were about 270 students.
Oh, wow.
So I get there, and the 1st Ranger Battalion was already taking charge. The PA, or physician assistant, was a guy named Doc Donovan. That was his nickname, was Doc. But Chief Donovan, because in those days they were chief warrant officers. Doc had been in Vietnam as a medic, and then he was a warrant officer in the 1st Ranger Battalion, and he was very famous. Today he's in the Ranger Hall of Fame. That's what he is. So anyway, he had taken charge before I got there and got, we had dead Americans, dead Cubans, dead Grenadians. We had wounded Americans, wounded Cubans, wounded Americans, and we had the students. So he kind of separated it all. His medics were taking care of folks, and some of the Rangers were guarding to make sure the prisoners didn't do anything. So I got there and said, all right, I got a squad of MPs with me. So I got the MPs to take charge of the prisoners. And then I went into the auditorium of the school where the kids were. And the auditorium was not like you would see here in America. It was really a room like this that was big enough to hold about 300 people. Okay. So it was a big room, but it was a shallow ceiling and that kind of thing. So I had all these students, and I said, okay, I got to see everybody's passport. I got to see who's here. I got to figure out who is here. My biggest fear was that a bomb hit and then I wouldn't know who was there. And now trying to sort out, for the parents or wherever.
Right.
So immediately I got everybody. I had this document that I Xeroxed or photocopied before I left. I said, I had this book of how to do what they call non-combatant evacuation operations. So I said, all right, in the book was this form to fill out. So I made like 500 copies of these and I shoved them in my rucksack.
This is before you got.
Yeah, before I got there, right? And in fact, like 4 days before we did this, we actually did an alert practice where we had to do this very operation.
Did you use like a whole mock site and everything? Or?
No, it was just a regular. We did an air assault. We didn't even jump out of airplanes. And I think that was because they want to save parachutes in case we had to jump.
Right.
So we did an air assault, and I went in with Bravo Company 2nd Battalion, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment, which I was in the regimental headquarters of 325, 2nd Brigade. And the company commander was my friend Mike Ritz. Fast forward to we invade, and he was unfortunately killed shortly after we got there. So anyway, Mike's company does, makes a perimeter around these evacuees that we have to do, and I have to do the evacuation. And for me, it was good practice, unbeknownst to me, of what I would have to do, 4 days later.
Right.
So anyway, I get on the island, I figure out who the students are, and I find out there are 4 Iranian students. Now, the mission is U.S. and friendly foreign nationals. Now, the Iran hostage crisis had just finished, in 1980. And I was like, they're Iranians. Now, they didn't seem threatening. They seemed like nice people, but I was like, I don't know. So in the dark, as dark as it is now.
I was just about to ask if this is like during the daylight.
This is all at night. I'm doing this. Yeah. So I said, all right, since it's getting like 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever, I said, everybody just lay down, go to sleep where you are. And I told Chief Donovan and the other guys, I said, look, I'm going to go up, find out from the 82nd Airborne Division commander what I'm supposed to do with these 4 Iranians and how soon we can get these people out of here.
Right.
So I, in the dark, I head toward the terminal of the airport because that's where we were using. And I figured that's where the headquarters would be. First, I went to my brigade CP, which was, a hole in the ground.
Yeah, right.
Like we always have, And Colonel Savasi said, yeah, division headquarters is right across the runway. And I went over there. I told Colonel Savasi what I had to do. And he said, got it. And the rest of the regiment and the 2 Ranger battalions and the 2 airborne battalions were on the ground. Our job was just to make a perimeter, keep the enemy out of the area, and keep them away. So I went to division headquarters, found the general, and the general and the G3 go, well, I don't know what the answer is. Let's call the State Department on this tactical satellite phone. I went, what? I'd never heard of anything like that. Right. They pick up a phone and they call the State Department. And the State Department said, yeah, just bring them all. We'll sort them out later. I said, okay, that's good. So General asked me, all right, when do you want to evacuate them? I said, sir, it's dangerous enough. We're doing this all in the dark. Let's wait till daylight. And that way the troops, we can push the perimeter larger. I'm worried about sniper fire, stuff like that. So General agrees with me, General Chobaugh. So I go back down, tell Chief and the guys, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take everybody. Got it. So when daylight comes, when it's daylight enough that I can see besides my hand in front of my face, I go up to the runway, and the first C-141 that lands, I run up, talk to the loadmaster. I go, hey, I got 270 students or whatever, well over 200. We need to get them out of here. How many can I put on this 141? He said, sir, we took all the seats out, so we can only take about 70. I said, oh, okay. So I said to myself, all right, women and children first, when the boat is sinking. Okay, we'll do the girls first,
Right.
So I ran back down, and the C-141 was sitting there, and they were nervous because they could, at any minute, they could have been shot at too. So it wasn't like,
they're not trying to spend a whole lot of time there.
That's right. Exactly. So I run down, and I say, all right, I want girls first. This is how many, yada, yada. And here's a piece of paper. I want you to list your names down. You line up, and then you list your name. Because, if the plane crashed, we got to know who was on, right? So I get at the end of the ramp. Now, I haven't bathed since, 2 or 3 days earlier, because when we started the alert, that was the last time I washed, parked my car, put my keys to my car in my desk in my office, and left it there. So it's about day, this is 24 hours after I got there, about 24 hours. And I'm not looking too good. I hadn't slept or anything like that. So the girls come up to the ramp, and I've got the list, and, Jane Doe, make sure that's Jane Doe getting on. And that girl grabs me and kisses me. This is a story the guys love me to tell. And so she kisses me. Now I'm single. I'm dating my future wife, but I'm single. And I'm like, hey, and these are all college kids.
Clear right now.
That's right. They're all college, co-eds going to medical school. Hey, next girl grabs me and kisses me. It goes on for like 4 girls.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. And then I see out of the corner of my eye, the Air Force has a combat camera crew. Now, these are guys trained to take video in war zones. That's their job. And they're filming this. So I go from, oh, this is so cool, to my mother and my girlfriend think I'm getting shot at, and here I am kissing women.
Please tell me that this video exists somewhere.
I've never seen it, but I'm sure it does.
Oh,
I'm sure
someone out there find this video.
That's right. So I immediately go, oh, crap, So anyway, I get all the girls on board. They take off. And then next 141, same, how many can I take? We got all that. So, we finally got them all out. And there is a picture I posted on my Facebook page occasionally of male students. They didn't kiss me. I didn't let them. But a male student gave me a high five as he's getting on board. And a friend of mine found that at the National Archives one time when he was doing a history project for our regiment. Oh, and wow. He got a copy of it for me. So it was pretty cool. But
so there's stuff out there.
Yeah, there is. It's out there. So that was, Grenada. And then went on while I was at Grenada, I captured 4 Cubans. Personally, we were reconning for a new TOC site.
Yeah.
And we're driving down in the Jeep, and I'm in the back. So I got the 2 NCOs are driving, these, Vietnam veteran NCOs. And I'm in the back with the rifle, make sure we don't get shot, whatever. I'm just the dumbass one. And all of a sudden I see this car pull out from a driveway behind us, and the driver immediately goes, oh. And in the front it says Cuban Embassy. And I stood up in the back of the Jeep with my rifle pointed at these guys. And I said to the master sergeant driving, Sergeant Attaway, slow down to a stop, please. And the other NCO, he looks back and goes, holy crap. So we captured those guys, Nice. But anyway, that was my claim to fame. And 2 weeks after I was in Grenada, I got back to Fort Bragg the 4th of November.
Wow. So how long was the deployment?
For us, we were the first units in. Like the Rangers were only there for about a week.
So this is a quick in and out operation.
That's right. Most of the fighting was done within 72 hours.
Wow.
What I found, in fact, the follow-on units, a lot of them came in kicking in the same doors we had kicked in days ago.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing. I was like, come on, we've done this already.
Right.
So, but
I was wondering, because this is when they went to all volunteer.
Yeah.
You think we'll ever go back to a draft system? You think it's possible?
It's possible.
I mean, the selective service is still there.
Yeah, it is very possible. With the state, let's say we had a war with China right now, I'd say we'd have to.
Right.
I personally believe, and this is probably contradicting to everybody that listens to your podcast, but I personally believe that the Chinese will not want a war with us.
Probably
it's too costly. And they want to bleed us dry economically. So they'll threaten war, and we'll spend all this money on war machines, which we won't need.
Right.
So they'll fight us economically. That's a ladybug flying around there. She's on your chest, on your shirt there.
Right there.
Is it a stink bug?
Stink bug.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're all over the place too. So, but anyway, I personally believe we always need to have that capability for a draft.
Right.
But we've been a better Army. We've been a better military as a volunteer.
Right, because then you have soldiers that really actually want to be there, or at least they understand that they chose to.
That's right. They chose. That's right. So, and also the Israelis had done, and I read this early on in my career.
They have compulsory service.
Right, they do. But they also found that smarter soldiers are better soldiers, meaning,
right.
And this is what changed when we went all volunteer service under Jimmy Carter. President Carter was very dumbed down, and the pay was really bad. We had soldiers who were on food stamps. It was that bad. Oof. Okay. Now we're back to that again, by the way, if you didn't know. Soldiers on food stamps. Yeah.
What?
So
wow, that's
seeing
something backwards there.
That's right. So the Army I came in, like I said, I had those drug addicts and only had 13 guys. The pay was bad. I got $9,000 a year as my starting salary as a lieutenant. But again, you got to factor in inflation, right?
Right.
But my cohorts who graduated college with me, who went to be Wall Street guys and whatever, they were getting 13 to 20,000. So I was still being underpaid, and our soldiers are even worse. So when Ronald Reagan got elected president, one of the first things he did is he gathered the military bosses, the generals and admirals, and said, all right, how do we fix the military? Because the raid to rescue the hostages in Iran failed. And it failed for a lot of reasons, not because of lack of bravery. A lot of it was lack of equipment, lack of coordination, all kinds of reasons. But one of the guys, the chief of staff of the Army, General Shai Meyer, brought with him was a guy named Brigadier General Maxwell Thurman, or Mad Max, as he later got to be known. General Thurman was the head of Army recruiting. He told President Reagan and all the other chairmans, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he said, look, we've got to do three things. We got to raise the pay of the soldiers and sailors. They're not going to join if they got to be on food stamps.
Right.
And they're not going to sacrifice if they're going to be on. Second, they got to all be high school graduates, which was great because not all my soldiers were high school graduates when I was a platoon leader. Right. I was a company commander. After all this, during the Reagan administration, every one of my soldiers had a high school degree. By the time I retired or I left Alaska, our command sergeant major for U.S. Army Alaska, he had a PhD. Huh. And I still had a bachelor's degree as a lieutenant colonel, It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And then the third thing that General Thurman said is you got to do drug testing that's effective and gets all the drugs.
Yeah. Not
just cocaine and heroin, but marijuana as well.
Right.
And that really changed everything when he did those three things. So Mad Max Thurman, General Thurman, it's called Mad Max because one, he and his brother, who General Thurman retired as a 4-star. His brother, General Thurman, retired as a 3-star. They never married, never had any families.
Wow.
And their other sibling in their family was a nun. So nobody got married, but they were dedicated. And General Thurman, Mad Max, he was so dedicated that he would work his staff sometimes at midnight and then have them come in at 6 the next morning. He'd sometimes have them work on Christmas because the things had to get done.
Wow.
That's how, they call him Mad Max. But if you understood that he was trying to make things better and you were prepared for the questions, then you did okay. But General Powell used to say, don't tell me what you think. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you don't know. Then tell me what you think. So that's important to the generals. They want to know what are the facts.
Right.
And then they'll make the decision, okay, I'll go with my gut or whatever. So General Thurman was like that. Fast forward to the invasion of Panama. General Thurman came out of retirement. He was already retired as a 4-star. They said, we need you back. And he became the commander for the invasion of Panama. So that's how well he is considered in the Army. So anyway, Mad Max saved the military. He alone. He unfortunately died of leukemia back probably 20 years ago or so. But Yeah, he was hard to work for, but if you understood what his standards were, you did okay, you know?
I definitely had some leaders like that.
Yeah.
In the military, where it's like at first you didn't like all the extra rules or whatever, but then once you saw what they were going for, and
yeah. I had a boss, Tom Needham, who's a real good friend of mine, belongs to our VFW post. He's a retired 2-star, but when he was battalion commander in Italy, and then he was brigade commander in Alaska. He was chief of staff of 18th Corps. We did the Panama invasion. He retired as a deputy corps commander of 18th Corps. People called him the Nuke him, Needham, because if you got on his bad side or he yelled at you, it was like you were flamethrowed. You know, he would nuke you. So he was an amazing guy. But if you understood why he was doing that, you had no problem. In fact, up in Alaska when he came up, I had a brigade commander take over at the same time he did, and this brigade commander was totally useless, truly useless. And I had worked for Needham before, and so had the brigade commander. I was the deputy commander, brigade commander, and battalion commander. So I knew Needham, and I knew what he expected. So first day of briefing, I went down all the stuff. I knew what he was going to ask, and bang, I did it. So I had no problems with him. But boy, my brigade commander always had, because brigade commander didn't want to do PT outside in the cold. So he didn't do PT. It's like, it's always cold in Alaska. You have no way of avoiding, right? Boy.
Wow, I got lucky with that one.
Yeah, well, Needham would run with me. You know, I'd see Needham in Alaska. You got to wear the balaclava over your face, right? Because it's so cold. So you can't really tell who anybody is, but Needham had been shot pretty badly in Vietnam. So he had a limp when he ran. So you always knew it was him. So I would run with my troops, and then I'd see Needham coming, and he'd say, "Gregory, we need to talk." So I'd already run 5 or 6 miles with my guys. Now I ran another 5 or 6 with him.
You can run long distance.
Yeah. But he was great to me, even though, he was really a hard ass on people. And I knew. So I would always be like in the background. In fact, the guy that's on Facebook with me, today's his birthday. And he, a few years back on Facebook, he reminded me of the story when he was a lieutenant, that his dog had torn up the yard, and Needham came by and just like smoked him because his dog tore up the yard. And this guy thought as a lieutenant, his career was over. And I was, trailing as the general was inspecting. I came along and said, "Lieutenant, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. You and I will take care of it. Got it?" "Yes, sir. Got it."
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Probably standing at attention.
That's right. I knew that he had been smoked by this 2-star. And I'm like, I know what it's like, his bark is worse than his bite,
Right.
Yeah. But he cared about the troops. That was the thing. When he was a battalion commander, you would go to your day room on a Sunday, and there would be the battalion commander watching football with the troops. Huh. And he would know more about your company than you knew. So that's why I did it, because he wanted to know, hey.
It wasn't just because he hated his wife back at home.
Yeah. Well, he never got married either.
Oh, well, then that helps.
Yeah. Another one. I mean, it was like on Monday, he goes, "So why are you out of Coca-Cola in your soda machine? Did you prepare for a weekend?" "No, sir, I didn't." So anyway, so I commanded in the 82nd Airborne Division, had a wonderful time. And then I went to Italy, commanded another company in Italy. And then what we did, we rotated the 2 battalions. It was 4th Battalion of 325, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment. And I had been in the 3rd Battalion of 325. So they swapped those 2 battalions. So the 4th Battalion took the place in the 82nd. And then I became the Battalion 4 when I came back. And then I became the Brigade 4 shortly thereafter. And then one day I'm in the brigade commander, Steve Silvesi, no longer a brigade commander. Steve Arnold now is brigade commander. Another super guy, did a lot for my career. But he came down to my office in the basement of the regiment headquarters, said, "Greg, tomorrow morning you're taking over headquarters company of the brigade." I said, "Sir, I've already had a company." He said, "That's why you're taking it. I just fired the company commander."
He's someone with some experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I go, "Oh God." And what was funny is I had been the S1 of this brigade years prior. I had been the S4 at the time when I was told that. I had commanded 2 rifle companies in the regiment. And now I'm going down to be the headquarters company commander. And the S1 of the brigade was a major, but I'd had his job before. I knew what he had to do.
Yeah.
The S2 was a buddy of mine from Italy. We had served together, and he was now the S2. So but we were friends. The S3 was another friend of mine from Italy who had been a company commander as well.
It was like a reunion.
Yeah. And then the S4, I was the S4. So whoever was going to replace me, I knew that job too. And I go down to the company, and the company commander was fired, was a friend of mine from Germany when I was a lieutenant there. And the first sergeant had worked for me when I was the S1. So I go down there, and, company commander's fired. So now we have to do the inventory to make sure everything's there, and not everything's there. It was a mess. It was a mess. The supply sergeant wasn't even a trained supply sergeant. He was an NCO that pretty much was like, he had enlisted when he was 30. So now he's like almost 50 and didn't have the energy.
So, cause like when a new commander takes over, they have to sign for everything.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
Of the whole
so here, there's all kinds of stuff missing. And I'm like, oh God. And then the first sergeant who had worked for me when I was the S1, turns out he was an alcoholic. So I had to fire him right away. And then I asked for all the Article 15s. And there was a stack of them, and this was unusual for me because when I had those two other rifle companies, I maybe gave a couple of Article 15s. Right. I mean, administrative Article 15s, you know what those are?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's you can't take pay. You don't take rank.
Right.
It's just basic, go to your room.
It stays internal.
That's right. Stays internal. I gave a bunch of those because I knew, taking rank and pay, that hurts, So I rarely ever gave a real Article 15. But with this, there was like a stack of them. And then I flipped through them, and they were for fighting. So I'm like, okay, Jones fought with another soldier. Okay, who's that other soldier? Well, he's not in the stack of Article 15s.
Yeah, wait.
And I'm like, wait a second, it takes two to tango here.
Right, yeah.
Turns out all the black kids, all the black soldiers got Article 15s. All the white guys who they fought with did not. I was like, holy Moses. Now, the fired company commander is white.
Was kind of prevalent
big time,
in the military.
Big time. Yep.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that because I didn't notice it in my previous experience with the 82nd, but this one
because someone had asked me about racism in the military, and I'm like, in my unit,
you didn't see it.
Like I'd never experienced anything like that.
To me, I found it's more what the leaders get away with. So the first sergeant and the company commander were both white, and they got away with this.
Wow.
The XO of the company was a black guy, and he wasn't Ranger qualified, which in the 82nd, you're like second class if you're not Ranger as a lieutenant, right? So I asked Paul Coakley was his name. I said, Paul, what's going on here? He said, sir, I'm black. I'm just telling you, that's the way it's been. I said, okay. So I went back to the regimental headquarters, and I saw our command sergeant major, who was a black guy, Command Sergeant Major Ford, super guy. I said, Command Sergeant Major, I want a black first sergeant. He smiled at me and goes, sir, I was hoping you'd say that. I have just the guy for you.
Right. Nice.
So I got First Sergeant Clarence Everett, who was already on the promotion list for Command Sergeant Major. Okay.
So he was already a high speed guy.
That's right. Yeah. He was high speed. And he came in, super guy. His daughter actually became the babysitter for our kids. She was just a wonderful girl. But Command Sergeant Major Everett and I got to be really good friends. And so they had an IG inspection that failed everything. And it was right before. That's why part of why the commander was fired, because their inspection failed everything.
Wow.
All right. So I go for the outbrief, which is in the brigade commander's office. And normally you have an outbrief like that. You have the brigade commander, battalion commander, and the company commander, first sergeant, and XO. Well, in this case, I don't have a battalion commander because I'm the headquarters of the regiment. I walk in the room, and the commanding general of the 82nd, General Johnson, is there. I'm like, okay, this is serious. So the IG, the inspector general, runs through the checklist of everything we failed.
Oh, boy.
Yep, and it was everything. And General Johnson looks at me and says, Darbone, this is your third command. You don't get 90 days to fix this like everybody. You get 60 days. I went, got it, sir. I got it. So I walked out of there and went, okay, I know my marching orders.
Right.
And in a way, I wasn't worried. I was like, okay, it's only fair. I've had 3 commands. I should know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I go back to the company with the XO, got the new first sergeant first sergeant Everett. And the 3 of us go back to the company, and I have a small staff. I have a training NCO, I have a supply clerk, and I have a motor sergeant, and I have what's called PLO clerk, parts, lubricant.
Oh, yeah.
The guy in the motor pool orders the parts, right? So I have those guys and I bring them together and I say, okay, look, guys, if we're going to pass this thing in 60 days, we're going to have to work every single day for the next 60 days. And
it's the worst thing to hear.
Yeah, it is. And I said, we're going to work long hours, all of us. And that's the only way we can get it done. We can't depend on the brigade staff because they got their jobs to do, supporting the brigade. So we're going to, when we need them for something, they'll do it. But it's 99% on us.
Right.
And I said, now, as a reward, I will give you anything you want. Anything. So I said, you just name it. So I go, XO, what do you want? He goes, sir, I want to go to Ranger School. Now, in the 82nd, we had more slots for Ranger School than we could fill. So I knew I could give it to him. And he was an officer. So that's kind of what they have to do. I said, Paul, you got it. Ranger School, no problem. My first sergeant, who was 38 years old at the time. Now, remember, I went to Ranger School at 20.
Yeah.
He's 38. He goes, sir, I'd like to go to Ranger School. I went, okay, first sergeant.
Going to Ranger School.
Yeah. And then I turned to my training NCO, Pete Markow. And I said, Pete, what do you want? He goes, sir, I want to go to Ranger School. Oh, my God. Okay. But he's infantry. So, okay, I got it so far. I look at my supply sergeant. I forget his name. Such a great guy. I should remember. But anyway, he goes, sir, I don't want Ranger School. I laughed. I go, I don't blame you, but what do you need? And I'll get it for you. He said, okay. So,
just some supplies.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You know how the other commander was missing stuff? I helped find stuff.
Wow.
I pulled in a lot of strings because, I'd been in the 82nd or Italy Mafia for 7 years practically at that point, So anyway, so I knew people. So he didn't want Ranger School.
Helps.
But then I turned to my motor sergeant and he says, sir, I want to go to Ranger School. Now he's a E6 staff sergeant. And I said, okay, Sergeant Walker. Yeah, you could probably make it. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. You're going to get Ranger School. Got it. And then I turned to my PLO clerk.
No way.
Specialist Gutierrez. And I go, all right, Gutierrez, what do you want? He smiles back. He's this Mexican-American guy. He says, sir, I want Ranger School.
I knew that was.
I went, oh my God. Now how am I going to pull that off? Right.
Yeah. How are you going to justify that?
That's right. So
I
said, I told you guys, I promised you. So, I went back, after we started, working 7 days a week, and, I went to regiment and I said, look, I need all these slots for Ranger School. And they said, okay, we're going to fill this one now, this. So it ended up like my XO had to go to Ranger School 3 weeks before we had the IG inspection. Oh, so I lost him 3 weeks before. I needed him to leave, right? So it's like, okay, you got it. So I had to do his stuff, Yep. And I lost my first sergeant a week before we had the thing. So we got through that. But so Sergeant Walker, he went like a week later or whatever to Ranger School. But Gutierrez, I said, all right, Gutierrez, this is how we're going to do this. I'm going to send you to my old company in 4th Battalion. And you're going to go report to the Alpha Company commander. And you're going to talk to Captain Morris, who was my good friend because we traded, we changed command a year prior. I said, and you're going to be an infantryman in his company for a month. Got it? Yes, sir, I got it. Now, this meant a month of no PLO clerk.
Right.
Which means I had to do some of that too.
So you doing
it's like I was putting this burden on me, but we had to pass the IG inspection, and we did. We ended up flying colors, passing it. So fast forward to life after all that. The XO became a Ranger. Okay, so he got his Ranger. First sergeant, he got his Ranger, and then became a command sergeant major in the 1st Brigade of the 82nd. He got his battalion and all that stuff. Sergeant Markow, he got his Ranger. He retired as a command sergeant major, Special Forces, and just retired as the head of the SWAT team for the Dothan, Alabama Police Department.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sergeant Walker became a chief warrant officer for Delta Force and was their maintenance officer.
That's awesome.
Yep. And Gutierrez, I'm at Fort Polk many years later, 1995. Yeah, 1995, September of 95. Our brigade from Alaska has to go to JRTC.
Oh, I've been there twice.
Yeah, same with me.
Fort Polk.
Yep. So we go, I'm the advanced party as deputy commander. I go ahead of time and get everything set up. So I'm, doing my morning PT, running out there with the troops, and I see Sergeant Specialist Gutierrez. So I yell out, Sergeant Gutierrez, thinking, I'd be a sergeant by now. Didn't respond. Sergeant Gutierrez, no response. So I run over to him and tap him on the shoulder. Hey, Sergeant Gutierrez, how are you? He goes, sir, how you doing? It's great. He goes, oh, by the way, it's Mr. Gutierrez, as in CW4, as in Chief Warrant Officer Grade 4, Gutierrez. So he goes, what are you doing these days? Oh, I'm, going to be here for rotation. He says, hey, tonight, come over to the house. My wife and I will treat you to dinner. Got it. Huh. So I go over to his house for dinner. And turns out he was the property book officer for Delta Force in his career. He retired at CW5. But I was like, all these guys that I put through Ranger School, it was just amazing that they did. And it wasn't because of me. They had the gumption to do it. I just gave them the opportunity. Sergeant Hogue, who worked in the commo shop of the regiment, he wanted to go to Ranger School too. So it wasn't part of the deal, but I sent him. He ended up being the Ranger Regiment commo NCO, and now as a retired NCO became a civilian employee of the Ranger Regiment as their IT director. I mean, so when I go down to Ranger Regiment, when I used to, at least, I used to travel at Fort Benning quite a bit for work, and I go visit Sergeant Matt Hogue, and we talk.
So it's about giving people the right opportunities.
And
seeing what happens.
That's right. And tell them you got to make it,
Right.
And they did, which is what I'm most proud of, is that they all did it. It's not because of what I did. It's not because I trained them.
Right, right.
It was, I gave them the opportunity, So it's kind of a life lesson that, they always say, don't volunteer in the Army. I'm like, no, volunteer, even the crappy jobs.
KP.
That's right. Because then people see that you're willing to do the hard work, In life, I find, the hard work is where the excitement is. Anybody can.
It's true.
Yeah. Anybody can, be a box handler.
Right.
If you want to do exciting. So anyway, that was my career in the 82nd. Then I went to Forces Command, where I was an investigator for the Inspector General's office. I went to the IG school. They teach you how to be an IG. And
well, you had some background in fixing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it paid off. It was like the first day of school. Most of you are going to be inspectors. Maybe a handful of you will be investigators. So we'll just cover that for like an hour, right? Well, it turns out that was my job. And I just investigated full colonels and command sergeant majors and sergeant majors. And the first day on the job, my boss said, this is all about bottles and zippers. And
bottles and zippers.
Yeah. Colonels and sergeant majors getting drunk and not doing what they're supposed to, and dropping their zipper. I went, okay, got it. So it was an interesting job. It really was. Some cases I won't talk about here, but yeah. And then
I bet. And did you? So was this just in military stuff, though, right?
Yeah, it was just military. And during all that, the invasion of Panama was coming up, and I had been the planner. After my headquarters company command, I moved to the G3 shop of the 82nd, where I was assistant plans officer for then Major Bill Caldwell, who retired as a 3-star, great guy. And one of my jobs was to write the plan for the invasion of Panama for the 82nd. Wow. So now I was at Forces Command as an investigator when the G3 of the 82nd, Dan McNeil, who I'd served with in Italy, had been a battalion commander. He ended up being a 4-star retired. He called me and said, hey, I need you to do a job. Talk to your boss. I need you to come to Fort Bragg. Got it. He didn't say why, but I knew it was related to the invasion. Right. So that's what I did.
I'm going to cut you off real quick. Hello, everyone. This is Justin Adams from Momentary Muse. Please excuse this quick interruption as I tell you about today's sponsor, Hopes and Dreams. Here at Momentary Muse, we have hopes and dreams. For example, my daughter Alana hopes to speak on our podcast, and therefore she dreams about having a microphone. Be like hopes and dreams, and sponsor an episode of Momentary Muse to help buy Alana a microphone, and to help us keep bringing you more episodes of exclusive interviews with interesting people. Now back to today's interview.
Yeah, Panama was before I went to Alaska. Yeah. So in Panama, we did the invasion, and then I went back to being an investigator. Yeah, there's a blue container back there. The turn to your right, to your left, the blue. Yep. 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 So yeah, we did Panama, and then I went back to being an investigator. But then in August 2nd of 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
Oh, so you went to Kuwait too, or you?
Yeah, so I went to that too.
I didn't know that you went to Desert.
Yeah,
because I kind of figured that it was probably Panama was your big one.
No, then in August 2nd, he invaded Kuwait, and Forces Command, where I was at the time, was in Atlanta at Fort McPherson, and that had the headquarters of Forces Command and headquarters of Third Army. Third Army covered the Middle East for the Army. So my next door neighbor, as soon as they invaded, he was like off to work, and I said to myself, well, I guess this might be one I miss. And that evening, Colonel Hook, who was the infantry branch chief, who had told me it was time to leave the 82nd Airborne Division a year prior. It's time to leave because you're the senior captain in the Army for infantry, and you need some time to get to know your family again, all that great stuff.
Right.
And he called me and said, tomorrow morning, you're reporting to Third Army headquarters. You're going to report to G3 operations, or you will work for Third Army. So I hang up the phone, and my wife says, oh, who's on the phone? I said, Colonel Hook. Oh, hey, how's Rich doing? Because she knew him.
Yeah.
He's doing good. She goes, what did he want? I said, well, tomorrow I'm going to Third Army, and I guess I'm going to Saudi Arabia. And she started cursing, like, he promised me you didn't have to deploy anymore.
Oh, no.
So yeah, I was trying to get my master's degree at the same time, and had dashed that and everything. So the next day, I reported Third Army, and on the 22nd of August, I took off and flew to Saudi Arabia aboard a C-141 and C-130 eventually. So anyway, get to Saudi Arabia. We move into Third Army headquarters, which is in the basement of some Saudi military building, where 200 of my closest friends, we all slept in cots, open cots, men and women, with one bathroom. It's like, and we ate airline food because that was at the time the only food they could get us for like 3 weeks. We ate airline food.
I ain't gonna lie, like, because I lived like that before too.
Yeah,
those are some of the times I miss. Believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting. I mean, it was like we were setting up shop in these offices, and as we got more people, we'd have to find another office because we were getting so big.
Set up some more cots.
Yeah, and we had at that time, the Guard and Reserve weren't called up like they were when you went to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
They had a volunteer at Third Army headquarters to go, or they didn't have to. So we had a bunch of people who didn't show up. That's why I had to go. I filled their slot. And then we had these reservists who showed up. One lady I'll never forget. She was a good looking woman, but she showed up one day. We hadn't bathed very well. He took a shower once or twice a week, maybe at best. She showed up with a ton of perfume on. I mean, it was enough to gag me. And I have a problem with perfume, ammonia, that kind of smells. Oh, God. I said, it smells like a French whorehouse here. And I embarrassed her, unfortunately, but she never did that again.
I had the opposite experience. When I got back from being over there, the first thing I smelled was perfume. And I was like, thank God.
Yeah, that's right. It's about time.
Something smells good finally.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, then we finally found this school, Escon Village, which is in Saudi Arabia. If you were deployed as a headquarters guy, you knew where Escon Village was, because even today, that's where the military stays. Oh. But we were the first ones. It was an abandoned village that the Saudi government gave to the Bedouins, and the Bedouins don't like that. They like the move. So it was abandoned for years.
Yeah.
So we took it over. And we built the headquarters in the middle of the compound and all kinds of stuff. So that's where we set up Third Army headquarters. And I became the G3 ops officer for the day shift. So when I got there, they actually had to frock me to major because I was on the list to make major. And I would have made it the 1st of September, but I was leaving the 22nd of August.
What's that word again?
Frocking.
Yeah.
So frocking means...
I haven't heard that name or that word in a long time.
Yeah, that's right. So frocking is you get the rank, but you don't get the pay.
Right.
So at least people know, okay, you're a major, you got to have that respect. But
they don't pay you for it.
That's right. They don't pay. So in order for my wife to pin my major rank on me, my boss, the IG, we can get things done. So, because we're IGs. And he got the orders to frock me. My wife pinned me. And the next day I left. So I'm a brand new major. And nobody knew me at Third Army headquarters when I got there. And by the end of it, I had a whole staff to work for me. So, and I briefed every morning. I briefed the generals, or I did the night shift brief to my staff. And then we briefed the generals in the morning. I had to do the big briefing every day. And then we did the targeting meeting. And then we, doing all the things that staff guys do. And then at the end of the day, we give the out brief to the night shift coming on. And that was actually filmed so they could have an airplane fly it to Washington, D.C. so the Joint Chiefs of Staff could view it.
Oh, wow.
So I had to be careful telling jokes because I was like, I'm trying to keep the lightness. Here we are at war. It's a little tense. So I would tell jokes just to
of course
relax people. So I was like, okay, General Powell's watching this. So
you have to be a little careful.
That's right. So yeah, it was a very interesting job. Got to see, big Army view because I'd never seen anything bigger than a division kind of view.
Right.
So here I was, the Theater Army. And this past AUSA we just had in early October, there's a guy who wrote a book about how they used the artillery in Desert Storm. So I was like, hey, let me tell you a story. So the map in our headquarters was about as big as this wall here. It was that tall and about that wide, maybe a little wider. And we had to use ladders to get up and put little stickies to book people, right? Today you use computers or whatever. But in my day, it was pieces of Post-it note for units. And one night, I don't know, I'm supposed to be day shift. So I'm there at 1 o'clock in the morning for some reason. But anyway, the guys, the Air Force and the Army are really starting to conflict with each other because we drew a no-fire line for the Army at through the middle of Iraq, someplace south of Euphrates River. And the Army guys are moving so fast. They're like, hey, we have to keep asking for permission from the Air Force to shoot because of this line. Can we move that line? And I'm like, all right, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Every one of the generals is asleep. Do I want to wake them up just for this? I said, no. So I said, all right, I turned everybody into talk. Air Force guys, the Army guys, coalition. I'm like, okay, guys, look, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We're going to wake up the generals just so they can tell us, move it up, 50 miles or whatever. We can do that decision, right? Everybody go, oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So I got up on the ladder and I drew a black line north of the Euphrates River. Just drew it. Okay, here's the new line.
Here's the new line.
Air Force, what do you think? And the Air Force LNO goes, that looks good. Because they let them bomb north of that line wherever they wanted. And Baghdad was north of the line. So I wanted to make sure. But the ATACMs, the MLRSs, multiple launch rocket systems the U.S. had, could reach to that line at least. But they were firing more south of the Euphrates River. So I said, how does that work? Artillery guys, they were like, yeah, that all works. So I told this to the guy at AUSA, who was an artillery guy for, I think, 1st Infantry Division at the time. He goes, man, you were brilliant. I remember when that happened. We were like, yes, we can do this. I'm like, I never knew what the impact was. I thought the next morning I'd be fired because when the generals came in, I went, first General Arnold.
Who drew this line?
That's right. Now, you remember General Steve Arnold, Colonel Arnold was my boss that made me the headquarters company commander. Well, in Desert Storm, he became my boss as the G3 of 3rd Army. So he was my boss again. So I said, sir, this is what I did. You can fire me if you want. He goes, no, that's good. That'll work.
That's a good line.
That's right. It's like, okay.
And you're doing all this from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So in Riyadh, we were at,
because Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait.
Right. He hadn't gone into Saudi Arabia. So.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Well, it's just because when I went over, we were in Kuwait, then went up to Iraq.
Right. Yeah. So we, where Safwan was in Iraq? That was kind of west of Kuwait. And early on in the war in 2003, they ran over Safwan, the U.S. But
oh yeah,
well, that's where we did the peace talks. So at the end of Desert Storm, that 100-hour thing,
right?
So I'm there, and my boss says, "Hey, I'm going to send you up to the peace talk site. I need you to set it up." Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
So I fly in a Black Hawk helicopter, up to Safwan. It was really cool.
So you did go into Iraq?
Oh yeah,
a little bit.
And in fact, we get up. We're heading to Kuwait City. And I look through.
It's a beautiful city, by the way. Well, or at least it was when I was there.
It was bombed out when I got there. But I'm flying into Kuwait City on the helicopter. I look through the front windshield and I see this mountain in front of me. I'm like, wow, that's pretty. And then I realized, wait a second, there's no mountains out here.
I was just about to say, I'm like, what mountains?
Yeah, I was like, wait a second. It was smoke from the oil wells that were burning.
Oh,
I'm like, oh my God. So we land in Kuwait to refuel. Then we fly up heading towards Saffron. We had to land again for refueling, and we landed. The 2nd Armored Division forward was the unit, and it was right near all these oil fires, and it sounded like it was just roaring out of the ground.
Wow.
And you're sucking in this oil and everything,
Must have been weird.
Yeah, it was, and it was. I don't know if you know what a Bic lighter is. But a Bic is a disposable lighter, right? It looked like a Bic lighter coming up out of the ground.
Yeah.
There was just this flame. It was amazing. Hundreds of feet into the air.
But what was Saddam Hussein's reasoning for doing that? Was it
just to delay us and get rid of just to delay the Americans. So anyway, do a environmental terrorism, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, we fly up to Saffron, and as we're coming into the Saffron, had a little airstrip. And I tell the pilot, just set it down next to that Bradley you see there. Yes, sir. So we land next to the Bradley. I run over, and it's a unit from the Quarter Cav, one of the first of the 4th Cavalry of the 1st Infantry Division, which when I was in Germany as a lieutenant, those guys are stationed at our caserna, So I said to the company or troop commander who is on that particular Bradley, I said, "Hey, Captain, where's the enemy?" He says, "Sir, you see that T-72 right over there?" And it was maybe, 500 meters away. I went, "Yeah." He says, "That's the enemy."
That's the enemy. There they are.
Right, get him out of here. We're going to set up the peace talks right here. And that's how it all started. The next 3 days I spent there, sort of. But then we got reinforced with generals and everybody setting up.
Right.
So General Carter from the 1st Infantry Division, 80C maneuver, he rides up at one point, maybe a day later or whatever. And I had never been on a Abrams tank before. I'd never been in a Bradley until that troop commander, right? So I said, he parks and we're talking because I'm the guy coordinating. And I said, "Sir, I've never been on an Abrams. You mind if I jump on board?" "No, come on up, Major." So I get up there and I get to meet him. So yeah, it was interesting. I got to see the peace talks.
So that must have been. So the peace talks. So you're talking between Iraq and Kuwait?
And between Iraq and the coalition.
Right, the coalition.
General Schwarzkopf, was the leader of it, and Prince bin Salman, or whatever his name was, from Saudi Arabia, was the deputy commander, So they all came in, and there was the Iraqis. And what they did when the Iraqis came in, they had an escort of Bradleys and Abrams, and then we had lined the runway with Abrams and Bradleys with their pointing their guns at them as they came down. We had Apaches and other helicopters above them, just to show them the might of the American army that they had just been beat by. So it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that must have been something to witness for sure.
Oh yeah. So I went back to the headquarters. One of the funny things in the 100-hour war, we did 99 frag orders or fragmentary orders off of the main order. And one guy, Mike Ellerby, who worked for me, and we had been in the 82nd before together as commanders, he wrote every single one of those frag orders, 99 orders in 100 hours.
Wow.
And I had, somebody come out, Mike could be, and we had ancient computers. We had these two old, what you would call old Apple computers. They had the monitor and the hard drive in it. And, they just did Harvard graphics, which was before PowerPoint. They did Harvard graphics. That's how we made it for slides or whatever. But, we used this old ancient computer system. Mike had to handwrite most of the orders first before we typed them in a computer. And so at one point, after 48 hours, I had to put him to bed because there was no way, he could stay awake forever. So I put him to bed. And then I woke him up a few hours later, write another order, keep writing. So as his reward, the Red Cross, International Red Cross came. They wanted to inspect the POW camps, make sure we were treating the prisoners. So before they came, I got with my staff and I said, all right, here's a route to get all the camps all done in one day. And the G3, General Arnold, approved it. And then General Yosak, the Third Army
Where were
commander.
the POW camps? Was this in Kuwait?
No, they were in Iraq.
So this is in Iraq. But were they the same camps that we were using when I went, Abu Ghraib or whatever?
No. These were field camps. They had Constantine up. That was about it.
Oh, wow. Little hasty camps.
That's right. Because, in 100 hours, we were collecting these guys up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We had
100 hours.
We had a few in Saudi Arabia. We had a few in Kuwait. But so I mapped it out, got approved by the generals, and the International Red Cross guy shows up, and he did exactly what he should have done, which I didn't anticipate. he said, Major, thank you very much, but we'll pick the route. And I went, oh yeah, because he probably would think that we had, did something. Hi, hey, what's up, Jeff? How are you?
Oh, it's Jeff.
He's our Scoutmaster.
Oh, Scoutmaster.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good. So he said, I'll pick the route because you could be hiding something.
Right.
And you don't want to. I went, So I got to meet Elizabeth Dole, who was the head of the American Red Cross. Very nice lady. Really nice. She's still alive, too. But anyway, he did allow me, the International Red Cross guy, allowed me to have one of my folks on board when they went. So I took Mike Ellerby, the guy who wrote all those frag orders.
Yep.
So they got on this commercial, like high-speed business jet. When he came back a couple of days later, he said, sir, that was great. I get on board and there's women with dresses and high heels. And we hadn't seen a woman like that. And then they hand me a glass of wine, we hadn't had any alcohol in so many months. So it was just great. And that was his reward for doing that. So it was really cool.
It is weird, like going from there to like here that quickly. It's like passing through this like
to the world. Yeah, I know. Yep. That's why whenever
almost
I always wanted to be deployed first so we could set the standard. And I never wanted to go home while I was deployed because I was just afraid that
first in, last to leave.
Yeah, it would just mess with my mind, going from a war zone home and then back to a war zone. No. And to me, that's one of the biggest mistakes we made with Iraq and Afghanistan.
Was mid-tour leaves?
Yeah. No, that we rotated units in and out. We should have said, you're there till it's over. We would have been done with Iraq and Afghanistan in 2 years if we did that.
I mean, you could have been right because, I mean, every time you switch a unit, they have to relearn the area, relearn all the threats.
Exactly. Yep. To me.
But we were also trying to maintain a 20-year-long war, which.
Yeah. But that's why we should have defeated the enemy for sure and not let anybody rotate. Then after we had done that, we could rotate. But it was like, we got to get everybody home. It's like when I got to Saudi Arabia. After 3 weeks, my fellow IGs who had also been plucked, to work for Third Army, they all wanted to go home. I'm like, I was the only one with combat experience, though. They were all remps, And I went, I'm not leaving until it's over, guys. So I walked away. And they were all outranked me. They were senior majors or lieutenant colonels. I just walked away. I said, no. And they ended up staying, and they were all sent to Pogue units, So, but anyway,
they're all important though.
That's right. They are. But no, it was that's how I spent Saudi Arabia. I had some fantastic people who worked for me. I had these two captains. They had both been in other assignments. One captain had lived and worked at Fort Irwin for 2 tours. He was at National Training Center. He had been an observer controller. He had been an OP4 commander, all this stuff. So he knew NTC. He had lived there for 6 years, is what it was.
Yeah, I'm glad I never got stationed there.
Yeah, and he was an armor guy.
I went there once.
Yeah, okay. And then the other guy was with me in Italy, Edge Gibbons. Both of these guys were captains, but Edge was an airborne guy, and they'd been in the 101st as well. So we had 2 corps, the 18th Corps and the 7th Corps. And I said, okay, 7th Corps is mainly armor. So Ken Lucas, he was the armor guy who had been in NTC. You're going to be the liaison to them. You're going to, because we had SATCOM radios and that the commanders could talk straight to the headquarters. So you're going to handle 7th Corps. And Edge, you're going to handle 18th Corps since you're airborne on 101st. That's who they mainly are. And he had done a tour with 4th I, or whoever was at Fort Carson at the time. So he knew mech and airborne. So he did them. And those guys, they had the confidence of the Corps commanders that the Corps commanders would ask to talk to them to get things. I was like, that's when you know you're a success, when a 3-star general talks to them. And then whenever the Corps commanders came to visit 3rd Army headquarters, they'd make it a point to stop in to talk to us, and they talked to those captains. I thought that was great. So I had them. I had Mike Ellerby, who wrote all the fragos kind of thing. And then I had Cameron, I can't remember his last name, but he was an MP. So I had him handle all the rear area protection type stuff. And then I had Randy Rosine, who was the captain who spoke Arabic, even though he was Jewish.
There's a juxtaposition there.
Exactly. So he never wore his yarmulke. Okay. So we made sure that, and we made sure no one knew that he was Jewish. I mean, we were all in our inner
circle. We had some Jewish soldiers like in our unit that we wouldn't take them out on patrols with us. Because well, I mean, they could get targeted, but
that's right.
Yeah.
So with Randy, we made sure everybody, NCOs, privates, they all knew, do not mention.
Right.
And he was in charge of all the coalition forces. And, we had Syria working for us. We had Egypt. We had the Saudis. So anything communication with those folks, it went through Randy. It was really cool. And then I forget the sergeant's name, but he sat right next to me and he would keep the log and he'd be on the phone or radio. He and I were communicating. He was like, we were, attached to the hip kind of thing. So it was really cool. And then we had privates and other sergeants who moved the chips on the map, who typed up the slides and all that kind of stuff. So by the end of the war, I had like 50 people working with me that, when I got there, it was myself.
Yeah.
So it was really quite interesting. And then I got back home and I went to the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, where I learned all the things I should have known during the war. It was kind of funny because the instructors would say, this is how you do it. And I'd raise my hand and go, well, that's not how we did it. Let me tell you how we did it.
It's like, I get that. It works in practice, but here's how it works.
That's right. Here's in real world how we did it. It's kind of funny. So that was interesting. And then after Command and General Staff College, which is a year, that's when I went up to Alaska.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, in the interest of just
time,
and getting her to school tomorrow and all that stuff, let's kind of get back to where we are now.
Okay, and this building, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So this building was built in 1893.
1893.
Yeah, I believe that.
Wow. So it's not as old as I thought it would.
Yeah, but it is one of the original one-room schoolhouses. If you look over where the entrance is over here, that was where the boys would come in. There was an exact same foyer setup on the right side over there, as we're looking at it, where the kitchen is today. But that's where the girls came in. Why that was, I don't know, because they all came into this one central room that was not divided.
Yeah.
Okay. This desk here is the original teacher's desk. The desk behind you is an original student desk. All right.
We'll have to make sure get some B-reel of that.
Yeah, so that's that. And then let's see what else. Downstairs, underneath this portion where the teacher's chair is, underneath there was the latrines and marked boy and girl. If you go downstairs, you'll see this is built on a rock formation. Huge, like 6 foot long by 3 foot high by 3 foot deep blocks of granite piled, blocks like Legos is what made the foundation of this building. So, 1919, when the guys came back from World War I, they wanted to form an American Legion. That's when the Legion was actually formed in 1919. And it was started in France by the World War I Americans who were over there. And they had, their first convention, decided to make it. So they brought that idea back to the States, and every state in the Union wanted to have an American Legion post, and Brookline said, yeah, we want to be one too. So we were formed officially in 1920, February of 1920.
Oh, wow.
Our certificates up there says that. And they first met, which is the old post office, which then became the country store down the road there. That's where the first meeting was held upstairs.
Ah.
And eventually they come back, they eventually get this building after the war kind of thing. And then there's World War II. The guys come back from World War II, and this building is now in disarray. The floors are starting to sink, all kinds of problems. So they decide, we're going to fix this place up. If we're going to have this, the town gave it to the American Legion, and it can be a veterans building as long as there's a veteran organization in Brookline. When there's no veteran organization, it reverts back to the town. So no problem. So, the floors are sinking and all that. So what they did is they got some about 6x6 timbers and shored up the floors. And then they eventually put iron, steel, whatever, lolly columns downstairs to hold up the floors. One of those timbers, they just left downstairs and had been sitting there since 1945, 46. Well, a couple of years ago, I said, we need a new front door. So I took that timber down to my wood shop. I sliced it up, and I made the new front door out of that timber.
The door we came in?
Yep, the door you came in. So that's how I made that door. The next project I'm going to do is I'm going to make a replica of that student desk for over here. This desk. We normally, the quartermaster or somebody sits at this desk. Well, I want to have a replica, and I'm going to try and do it exactly the same as them. They did not use any glue in those days, and very few screws. A lot of it was pegs that are drilled into a hole that's a little offset, so it tightens it when it comes together. I'm going to try and do that, but I'm going to cheat using power tools.
Not going to do it the old hard way.
That's right. So the floor we've redone recently, so it looks pretty darn good. What else have we done recently? So that over there is the VFW kind of wall. Those are not all the commanders. You'll see my pictures up on there. At one point, I was still in active duty when I was the VFW commander. We've got other commanders that I have the pictures. We got to hang those up. That print that's up there, the 1st Infantry Division, that was given to us by Jim Ryan, the artist for that picture. I actually know him. He was at my retirement.
Is he the one that was at that AUSA meeting?
Yep.
He brought some of those paintings.
Yep. That's him.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yep. And then, we have various pictures of things. And back here is the wall for the American Legion. That's where we kind of put VFW that side, American Legion that side. The original members of the American Legion post and those who came back from World War II, those pictures are at my shop because I have to make a new frame. One of the pictures fell and the frame broke, so I got to make a new frame. So I'm trying to copy with the other frames so they match, kind of thing. So we'll do that. Cool. In that corner there is going to be the Boy Scout corner. We sponsor the Boy Scout troop and the Cub Scout pack. So anything they got, you'll see the charter for the Boy Scouts is there.
Nice.
Their stuff is downstairs. This monument here, Pillars of Freedom, we're calling it. It's paid for. It's just waiting for that 4x4x4 foundation to be built so we can. Otherwise, people would be looking at the monument down because it's shrank into the ground.
All right, because it'll just sink.
That's right. The flags you see back there are flags presented to the post from members who were deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Oh, so they've been flown over the embassies of America in those places.
Nice.
The painting back there was given to us by Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who gave it as, thanks for service kind of thing. Let's see what else. That's about it. Downstairs in the basement is all the Boy Scout stuff. And we've done a lot of work on this place,
Is there anything, like, if anyone wants to, like, donate or anything that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, we always looking for money for repairs for the building. Like, the latest thing we need to do is put gutters on the building because water keeps coming in through the back. And I figured out it's because the roof, all that water off the roof slopes to the back and it floods the basement. So I had a guy come estimate for gutters just yesterday, and it was like $5,000. So I'm like, okay, it's a tall building. You got to get up a ladder, all that great stuff. So I'm like,
it's too bad I don't do gutters anymore. Yeah. I used to do gutters.
Certainly that. But we try to donate our money to helping other veterans. So, for instance, there was a couple that lived here in Brookline who were pretty much destitute a few years ago, not just a few, and they were running out of fuel oil. Oof. So they called, and somehow my name, they got to me.
Right.
So I called Buddy Doherty, who's on the Conservation Commission for Brookline, but also works for Rime Fuel Oil. And I said, hey, Buddy, we got a situation. What do you think? He says, yeah, we can do that. So he and I personally filled up 5-gallon cans of fuel oil.
Oh, wow.
And delivered it to the house and poured them one at a time into their fuel oil tank to take care of them. So the other day, last week, in fact, the wife of that family, she called me and said her husband had just died.
Oh, no.
He had Alzheimer's and, and they were, in their 80s, but still, so I had always told her, make sure you let me know when he dies. And I told her, okay, we will be there at his funeral to render any military honors, just like we did for your grandfather.
Right.
All right. Aim.
It's we don't care if you're a member or not. We had another guy in Hollis, his mentor. It wasn't even his family member, but it was his mentor. he took him in the last few months of his life, this guy's life. He was a veteran, and he just passed away. And we told this guy, who has paid for our breakfast many times at the Hollis Diner, hey, we'll be there and take care of any funeral honors for your mentor.
Wow.
Because we know it's important. It's, when the town supports you, we want to support the town, kind of thing. So I just feel very lucky when I talk to the students at the middle school or the high school. I always praise not only the students, but the teachers too, that are instilling a sense of patriotism. We are very lucky in the Hollis Brookline area. I go to the VFW and American Legion and other towns and places, and they can't even get into the schools. They don't know what to do. I think a lot of it has to do with not being able to relate to people because, age differences.
Yeah.
But still, we don't even ask the schools. They call us, which is really cool.
Yeah. I feel like Hollis Brookline's always been good about that.
Yep. Even though, there are political differences. I understand.
Yeah. And that's what we fought for. Was that we can be that kind of country.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Jim Pope talks about that. He says, he's a Vietnam veteran. He says, people protest when I came home, but you know what? I thought that's why I served. So they could do that,
Yeah.
I don't like it, but that's why, we have that freedom. And in today's paper, there was a guy who was a Navy veteran who was a town moderator someplace, but he wrote a letter similar to that the American flag stands for all of us.
Right.
No matter what you believe, you're a Democrat, Republican, this, that, or whatever. It's for all of us,
Yeah.
He bashed the Republicans and Democrats, said a lot of you Republicans think the flag is just for you and only you can be patriotic,
Right.
And then the Democrats, a lot of you hate America. Hey, you got that freedom,
Yeah.
So it was a great article. I thought he did a good job.
Oh, definitely. I'll have to check it out. I don't think I saw that article.
Yeah. It's in the Union Leader. The other thing in Union Leader today was about freedom of speech. And I liked what they said. I don't know if you know, UNH was named like the most free college in America.
Really?
Freedom of speech.
I did not know that. Wow.
Right. So, which is good.
Yeah. No, it's definitely.
But then the other day, there was a professor and some students who protested against Israel were in support of Hamas. Well, a couple of our state senators said, we need to censor them and stop them and all that. And the dean, the president of UNH, President Dean, that's his name, said, no, free speech.
Yeah.
Means even speech we don't like. And I was like, and the union leaders supported him. They were like, that's
good.
Free speech means all the time or none of the time. Which one do you want?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't understand these kids who protest in support of Hamas and the Palestine and all that crap. I don't understand that because to me, they're all ignorant of history and everything and ignorant of what the Hamas guys did. But if that's what they want to say, let's have a counter protest. Let's see how many people we can have that support Israel and all that. So,
right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you got to talk.
That's right. Exactly. Right. So, So anyway, this building has been great. When I first got here, the windows were just single pane, the original windows. We didn't have meetings in the winter because it was too darn cold. Up in the attic, I got up there one time and there was just junk up there with no insulation. So I've been here 27 plus years. We put in storm windows. We put insulation on the top. We've painted the interior. This was an Eagle Scout project. Alex Hickerson. This was his project. I don't know if you knew Alex. You knew.
What was his last name again?
Hickerson. You knew his brother. I think his brother, and I can't remember his brother's name. Adam Hickerson.
I'm horrible with names. That's the thing.
Well, anyway,
someone's going to call me. I'll be like, you forgot who I was.
Sorry. Well, anyway, Alex, he did this as his Eagle Scout project interior. We've had several Eagle Scout projects that helped the post. So, but it's been good. It's a great place for us to meet and do things like this. We open it up to the community. So if anybody wants to rent it, it's $25 to rent. There's not a lot of amenities. We do have hot water. We have a bathroom. Yeah. We have a stove. The refrigerator does not work though. We got to get rid of that. But yeah, it's got a purpose there. And the Boy Scouts get to use it for free. We don't charge them because we sponsor them.
Right.
And the Cub Scouts. So.
Well, Greg, I think what you do here is awesome, especially for veterans and, someone has to keep it going, right? And
well, how about get your father? He's a veteran.
Right. Oh, we got to get our bricks too. They never sent for that.
Okay. Well, I'll shoot you the connection for that.
Absolutely. But I appreciate you coming on I don't want to keep us up all night. Right?
Yeah. Sorry if I rambled too long.
Oh no, that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So,
okay.
But if anyone else there wants to support, we're setting up a Patreon and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got it all going.
That's good. You got your IT director there.
Right.
Your producer. CC.
Yeah, producer. Right.
That's right. Well, Alana, it was a pleasure talking with you as well. And good luck at school.
Awesome.
And I'm glad to see things are going good for you. You like your job?
I love my job, actually.
Good.
Yeah. My new job. My boss is awesome. We get along great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like a culture of health, which I like. Yeah. So I've been running like every day recently.
Good.
So
good.
It's been helping with all that. Yeah.
That's
love
super.
it.
Super. I'll tell you what, I got a Facebook entry from a friend yesterday, full colonel retired. He worked for me when he was a captain, and he talked about his struggling with PTSD.
Oh, hey, we all do it.
That's what I told him. I said, "You're not alone. Give me a call."
That's the biggest thing that I had to learn.
Yeah.
Is it, and not even necessarily soldiers.
Yeah,
a lot of people experience trauma.
Yeah, it could be a car wreck and all that. It's you just got to recognize that it's going to happen.
Yeah. If it hasn't yet, it will eventually.
That's right. And how you deal with it, that's the thing to me, I had a real quick story. A friend of mine, he served me in Italy. He graduated number 2 in his class at West Point. Really smart guy. So he's finally at West Point teaching ethics and stuff and philosophy. And he had never been to war. And this war starts, in 2003. And he says, "Hey, I got to go to war because I got to face these cadets who are going to go." And he complains and he uses his connections, and he finally gets one of our folks who's a retired, or was a 4-star at the time. So they send him over to Iraq, and it's during the surge when General Petraeus was the 3-star over there. And this guy, he wrote a paper once before the war that PTSD is just from a lack of physical ability and lack of moral courage.
Oh,
and when I read that, I went, that is so wrong.
Yeah.
Well, as the war goes on, and he's there, for his year, about 3 weeks before he comes home, he commits suicide. So, he's got a young family too. His oldest is 6 years old. He's got 3 kids. Something. So one of my friends does the postmortem investigation. Could we have found this? And going through his emails to his wife, you see where he was going downhill mentally.
Oh,
and it's like all the things that he said was a weakness he was having. Yeah. He didn't recognize it himself. Petraeus, he said, was, harping on him. He saw the world as black and white.
Yeah.
He saw contractors who were cheating the U.S. government, Iraqis cheating, and he just couldn't wrap his head around that, which is different than the guy who graduated first in his class, the guy right ahead of him, West Point, who did like 7 deployments to war, had been to war several times, retired as a 2-star. But I figured it out, and this is what I said to friends. The first guy, the number 1 guy, had had failures in his life. So he knew how to deal with failure. The guy who was number 2 had never failed at anything in his life. Huh. And when this was happening, the war was his first experience of failure. He didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Which kind of that brings it right back to the beginning of how, adversity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Adversity is can steal you or steal you. Right. Well, all right. Great interview. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing it.
No, appreciate it.